Hi, thanks for joining today's meditation. My name is Maveen Kaura. I am from discoveryourlifetoday.com. I ask you to join today's meditation. It is more of a meditative talk about relationships. I want to talk about this because obviously I think everybody is in a relationship, either with themselves, with a spouse, a partner, their children, employees, employers. No matter what it is, you're always in a relationship with somebody else. I hope the best relationship you do have is with yourself. I want to talk about this and hope you follow along and understand and the advice that I hopefully am giving. And try to look at things from two different perspectives. Like always, just try to not only be emotional but be logical to what I'm saying and really try to understand both sides of the relationship and the advice that I give myself to give to you, the listener. So, any good relationship, in my personal opinion, starts with a great foundation of communication, trust, love, loyalty, working together, common goals, commonality, just really love, happiness, knowing that you are there for the other person. There's so many things that go into a marriage, not only financially but spiritually. There's so much support that each person needs in that relationship, right? No matter what type of relationship you have. I guess when I'm talking, I'll be talking more about marriage and relationships, but really you can take this talk and really apply it to really any sort of relationship that you may be in with other people. I believe communication is so key. One of the things, I grew up in a family where I don't think communication between my parents was always the strongest. The communication they had was very limited and was probably a lot of fighting, arguing, loud speaking. Indian people or East Indian people are very loud as it is, but they were extremely loud in trying to get their point across. And I believe these points were trying to be made because of egoic reasons. I think everybody's got an ego, and when you let your ego run your life and your thought process and your emotions, your ego doesn't have a chance to be very logical and consider both sides of the equation to understand not only yourself but the other person. So communication is extremely important. I feel, couples will fight, people have arguments, they will not see everything eye to eye, nor should they. But I do believe that when people don't see things eye to eye, it does give them the opportunity to not only learn from each other, look at the other side and the other perspective, and try to really understand where that person is coming from and not judge things, but look at things objectively. A great example in business and in relationships, and hopefully I can make this analogy make sense, is, when you first get into the relationship, it's like pouring concrete. You pour the concrete, you get into that relationship, you kind of settle into that relationship just like concrete cures. And as you get into that relationship, everybody in that relationship gets very comfortable with each other, and over time that concrete hardens and you hope that relationship solidifies. But over time, just like anything, an argument, a mishap, a misunderstanding can happen in a relationship, just like a small little crack can occur in concrete. If you take care of those mishaps, those misunderstandings, those miscommunications, those little arguments that happen, you can patch them up, just like a crack in the concrete. If you go to your local hardware store Home Depot, Lowe's, wherever, and you pick up some concrete patch. You can patch up that little piece of concrete that had cracked and fix it, maybe seal it, whatever needs to be done, and you can move on. You can deal with the problem at hand in that relationship through good communication. But what happens is, if you don't deal with that broken concrete and you say, well, it's only a little chip in the concrete, no big deal, nothing's gonna happen. It's just like letting things marinate in a fight and just kind of not dealing with the things that happen in fights. A lot of people do it. A lot of people don't want to talk about it. They just stay angry at each other, and they will allow themselves to have space, which is fine because everybody needs space. But having too much space after a disagreement can, I believe, cause more problems than solve problems. Sometimes, not all the time. But it's just like that little crack in the concrete. If you had just dealt with it up front, you wouldn't have to go and have a bigger problem. Sometimes what happens is the crack gets bigger. And now maybe you don't know how to fix that crack or what supplies you need to go buy. So you maybe call a contractor and say, hey, can you take a look at this concrete? I don't know what to do, so I'm bringing in an expert. Just like, when people are going through a marriage, sometimes they bring in counselors, family members, friends, who they believe can help in the situation. So very similar, just like in business, no different. The contractor may look at the concrete and say, yeah, I can, bring a couple of guys in and whatever, and we'll get some supplies, we'll get everything fixed up. But, my work is only guaranteed for a year. And after that, you got to continue to take care of it. You got to seal the concrete every year. I need you to ensure there's no other cracks. Nothing new has started. Just like in a relationship, people can help you fix it, but you got to continually work on that relationship and communicate properly in that relationship in order to grow it and ensure that no new additional cracks can happen. And if they do, you want to get rid of those cracks as much as possible right away, and by bringing in that patch concrete and fixing it. So far, I hope that makes sense. What happens though is I find a lot of people, they don't want to deal with the problem. They want to just kind of deal with the surface level stuff. They rather just brush it under the rug and say, hey, not a big deal. We fought about it. Let's just forget it. Let's move on. When you do that, it definitely looks good, feels good up front. But the problem is really just kind of brushing it under the table. You're not really dealing with the problem. And of course, when you don't deal with problems, as we all know, problems will resurface. So maybe now you have a crack in the concrete somewhere else, maybe a larger crack because it's over time of not dealing with things, the water gets into the little crack, winter comes and expands and it makes that crack bigger and bigger and bigger. Just like you see on the streets, sometimes there's potholes. This is exactly how potholes are formed. Constantly people driving over it, wear and tear, and hot and cold weather expanding and contracting the cement. So when that does happen, it creates bigger holes, and then it creates bigger holes, and then even you'll see sometimes that the whole street from underneath will fall out. Well, what happens when that happens, it's like in a marriage, when the whole street falls out from underneath, that's when people go through some problems. Counseling, divorce, they've already moved on to the next step. People have let go of each other. They've moved on to a different partner, whatever. Now, in order to fix that problem, you have to really bring in a construction crew and really get people in there, really dig and really replace a lot of different things or fix problems that if we had just dealt with them up front, less problems would have occurred over time. Now, what happens if you don't deal with that problem? Well, eventually things just keep getting eroded and eroded and eroded, and people get further and further and further apart, and you have a lot of things come in the middle. Family comes in the middle, friends come in the middle, counselors, and more fighting and more space between the two of you come in there. And over time, as the crack gets bigger and bigger, you start getting into valleys, and the water goes through and starts cutting all that up, and eventually you get things like the Grand Canyon. You start from a very small drop, and that drop created a river, and that river started just cutting through it just over hundreds and thousands of years. And now you got the Grand Canyon. And imagine trying to patch the Grand Canyon. You probably can't. You couldn't get enough people to patch the Grand Canyon. And that's what happens, I find, when people do not communicate in their marriage, in their business, with friends and family. Things happen, and sometimes you can't scale back or go back to fix problems. That's the first thing. I think other than communication, I do feel trust. Being able to express yourself is huge. I found when it comes to expressing yourself as a man, I grew up watching the men in my life, my dad, my uncle, my cousins, my grandparents, for some of it, not all of it. But I watched them, and I noticed how hard it was for them to really express, at least in my dad's case, his true feelings. So growing up, I noticed this, and I said, well, if that's something he can't do, and this is what him and my mother have for a marriage, I want to be able to learn to express myself, my true feelings, to the person that I'm with, my partner. And I've always done my best to express myself and be honest and truthful as I can be. I find the more truthful I am with somebody else, the more truthful I am being to myself about who I am, what I am, and my expectations of myself. So I ask you to do the same. The more truthful you are to yourself, and the more truthful you'll be to other people. And the more truthful you're to other people, the more you'll actually learn about yourself and have the ability to not fake who you are to the rest of the world. So, what I would do is I found if I had a problem, I would express it. If I have an issue, I express it. If I feel happy, I express it. If I feel sad, let the person know. I have to find the right time, of course. The right time is not always here and now. Sometimes you really gotta let some space between things. You gotta find the right time. You can't sometimes always talk about things over dinner. You might have to maybe go for a coffee to talk about things. Maybe, you have a conversation, you turn off the TV and say, hey, let's not do a movie. I got a couple things I want to talk to you about. And you really just have a good conversation and talk openly and freely, allowing each other to express yourselves as well, not just one party, but really both parties in that relationship. You want to be able to take each other's opinions for what they are and use them to make yourselves better. Because if you both have goals that are in place and both of you understand what those goals are, then I think the ability to make the right decisions, have the right conversations based on the problems you have will usually solve themselves if you understand what the big goal is. And really understand that if it doesn't matter 5 years from now, it probably is not going to matter 5 days from now. Many times we all like to let our egos win. We want our ego to feel great about things, so we'll hold on to things longer than we necessarily have to. And that's why I found really just expressing myself on who I was and who I am allows me to let go of my ego, the expectations of my ego, and who my ego believes he is. It allows me to hopefully just free myself to be myself, just be the name that I was given, be Maveen Kaura. Even Maveen Kaura is really not who I am. It's just now become who I am based on the belief of who Maveen Kaura really is. But that's another topic for another time for sure. Some of the other things I really feel like that are really important is just supporting each other, understanding what each person is going through on a daily basis, understanding how you can be there for that person, how you can support that person, understanding what it's going to take for you as the partner to be able to support that person. Maybe that person needs you to grow to a certain place in order for you to then be able to support that person the way they need to be supported. One of the greatest books I read was called The Five Love Languages. What a great book. I only read it once. I do have a copy of it somewhere on my shelf. But it really talks about understanding how to communicate with your partner in the way they want to be communicated in, and vice versa, right? Don't communicate with people in the way you think they want to be communicated in. To really communicate with them the way they want you to communicate with them, the way they will feel optimal when you're talking to them. You know, when we talk to people the way they want to be talked to, not the way we feel they want to be talked to, then you're really paying attention to that person and not making it about yourself. Because when you make it about yourself, you're making it about your ego and how your ego feels. Well, if I just talk to everybody this way, eventually, you know, I'll just talk to the right people or whatever. I think you got to be able to laugh and joke around, not take yourself too seriously. I'll be honest, sometimes I'm a pretty serious person. I do find it harder to laugh at things or smile about things. Sometimes I don't find myself being as empathetic to people as I really hope I am. I'm definitely working on that about myself, trying to feel more empathy to people, really put myself in the people's place and in their shoes. And that's why I like to have these type of conversations and just kind of let the ideas free flow, because the more I'm able to kind of go back and forth between two different things or two different perspectives, the more ability I gain to be able to put myself in somebody else's shoes, really feel what they're feeling. So it's really helpful though when I'm talking to my spouse and I'm talking about things that I feel, and then when she's expressing herself, it allows me to really understand, okay, that's what she means from her perspective. Okay, is there something else she could mean? Maybe is there a question I should be asking in order for me to be able to gain a little bit better insight? You know, so I try my best to do those things to bring in good communication, to also then to be able to smile and joke around and really just not take everything so seriously. I know one of the things I've learned from my wife is just to really try not to take things so seriously. So we do a lot of things just to kind of make the other person laugh, to kind of realize, you know, hey, you know what, I think you did something stupid, but we're just going to make a joke of it. So, you know, if the other person's just kind of like moody or whatnot, we'll be like, hey, cheese whiz. And just if you remember those Cheese Whiz commercials and the song that used to say, hey, Cheese Whiz adds personality, we would say, hey, you need to add some personality to yourself because you're being kind of a certain way. So we would just use that, and it's just a key word to make the other person say, hey, you know what, look at the way you're acting right now. It's not really the greatest way. I want you to maybe look at it right now. You're kind of bothering me or annoying me, but it's a great way to say it without really saying it. It's really more of like, you know, hey, I want to communicate with you, I want to talk to you, I want to laugh with you, I want to sit with you, but you're kind of not in the right space, so I really don't want to. So, you know, when you hear that statement, at least when I hear it, it makes me think about it. It says, you know what, maybe I'm not being the right type of person right now, and maybe I do need to change the way I'm thinking, and I will, right? And I kind of do it right away. Sometimes it's just getting out of where you're sitting or getting out of the space that you're in, maybe going upstairs, coming back downstairs, and kind of restarting that whole day, going outside for 5 minutes, standing in the sun, whatever it takes to kind of take yourself out of that headspace, to put yourself in a space where you and your spouse can enjoy. I do feel there's lots of things, right, that do make marriages work. And obviously, I've only given the very fine tip of the iceberg there. There's a lot of things that you have to do daily, especially when you add children into the mix. Children totally add a different dynamic on the way your relationship will work with each other, as well as what each individual person's relationship works with the child, and then how your collective relationship works with that child as well. So it's really interesting, and it's always about, I think, really supporting each other in the way you're going to raise your child. You know, if one person is disciplining because of a certain thing that the child's doing or not doing, then I think the support needs to be there, as long as you both agree that whatever that child is doing is something you both don't want that child to take on as a image of themselves, I guess. It's really about being on the same page as well. Again, understanding the goals that you have with this child. What are you trying to accomplish? How are you trying to raise this child in the marriage, and how that child will flourish because of the marriage that you have, hopefully, right? If your child can hopefully see a great relationship between his or her parents, then hopefully that's the relationship your child wants to emulate as your child grows up. Not always, but you know, no one's perfect, and that's all you can really do is try to be in a situation where your kid will say, hey, you know what, I really look up to my parents, and not necessarily have to look up to somebody else's parents, or entertainers, or musicians, or next door neighbor, whoever, right? Really, I believe, want your children to, I think we all want it, our children to look up to us, come to us for any answers or questions that they can't answer for themselves. We want to protect them the best we can. We want to teach them all we can. And it all starts by having a good foundation between the two spouse, husband, wife, husband, wife, whatever. As long as that foundation is great, then I feel that you can build that foundation and pass that foundation off to your children. Even more interesting when you start adding additional children into the dynamic. Can't really speak of that. I only have one child with my wife, so I can't really speak of multiple children. I have no idea, but I'm assuming that would be very similar to what I just said. The dynamic would change. How you treat individual children would obviously be based on their personalities. You really need to understand that, and how to talk to them as well. Similar to the 5 love languages, the way you talk to your spouse, you're going to have a certain way you would talk to each one of your children based on their personalities. And hopefully they would talk to you as they grow up in the same way as your spouse would talk to you in the same way. I want you to really take a moment to appreciate your spouse if you have one. If you don't have one, maybe appreciate the spouse that you hopefully will have one day. Be grateful for the things that your spouse is or is not. Be grateful for all the moments that you've been able to spend with that person, even if you're going through tough times. Be able to show that person appreciation. A simple thank you, a smile, I love you. Those 3 little things go a long way in a marriage. A thank you at work, a smile at work goes a long way. Hey, I appreciate everything you've done for me. These small words go such a long way, because realistically, I think every single person really just wants to be acknowledged. They want to be seen. They want to be heard. They want to be understood. If we can do all those things for other people, we will continue, I think, to do those things for ourselves. We'll continue to build on those relationships for other people and with other people, and only hopefully make everything better as we continue through life. Hope you enjoyed this talk. Leave a comment below, let me know what you think. Subscribe to the YouTube channel, hit the like button, and maybe share this with somebody who you feel would enjoy a topic on marriage, relationships, and maybe some of the things I feel that we should be doing to have successfulness in our marriages. Thank you so much. See you on the next talk.